Welcome, Herman. I really enjoy having you here on my next interview. And next of being an amazing human being, you are a good friend nowadays. And actually, I like for our viewers to give you and I a little intro pitch of who we are. And yeah, so shoot, please.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you very much, Sacha, for having me. I appreciate your time and interest in having a chat. Um, a brief intro. I always say about myself that I'm probably the most curious person in the world. I wish I had invisibility or flying as superpowers. My superpower is curiosity. As such, I have a tremendous fascination for how technology changes and affects humanity, how we interact, how we inform, how we transact, um, and and that's pretty much the story of my life. I've been longer in the internet than Google, and always fascinated by trying to understand how technology evolves and what is the next coming trend and how will be affecting us as human beings, as citizens, as employees, as customers, as users, and making sense out of it. And originally it started middle of the 90s with internet and e-commerce, then moved on to mobile, social media, and currently, since technology trends, emerging technologies evolve, looking into AI, blockchain quite deeply, fintech and IoT and health tech and those types of things. So the technology changes that interests me, but the fact that the area where I'm interested in, it doesn't really. So that's what I do, and I cover it as a speaker, as a consultant, as a storyteller. I run an agency focused on emerging technologies and disruptive business models to help companies thrive in the sector. And I do trainings, I do coachings, and yeah, you'll find me on stage here and there sharing that story about technology. How about you, Sasha? Tell me, what's your elevator pitch? That was a
So
big
I
elevator ride. I'm just noticing that was a big elevator ride.
Oh, yeah. So up one stage in New York, right up there. No, cool. My name is Sasha. I'm CEO and board member of the Swiss IT company and manufacturer Prime Computer. We help companies to reach their digitization environmental goals whilst reducing the total cost of ownership, and we do that with our smartly designed products. My personal motivation is to and vision is actually to motivate everyone in my surrounding and myself to be the best version of themselves, and obviously to push the generations coming and those existing to think and act in a more sustainable way towards our home planet Earth. And that's actually something I align on multiple levels. Um,
And
yeah, that's pretty it.
I'm trying to remember, how did we meet, Sasha? We haven't known each other for that long. How did you and I meet?
Yes. Actually, funny thing, and so we meet at a huge event, and we have been sitting on the same table. Because we have been guests of Pascal Kaufmann, a mutual friend and colleague, and on that we have been in the first row even, and we suddenly have been sitting next to each other, and I think it's right away clicked. We actually recognized at the end of, or nearly to the end of the evening, that we both speak German, and then we
I
talked
remember that. Yes.
each other, and yeah, we talked a lot, and since then, so it's nearly a year now, and we had a few interactions, a few lunches and calls, and actually found each other to be discussing, helping how we can in our mindset. So yeah, I really like that.
True. It's been only a year. It does feel like we've known each other for a much longer while. But yes, actually, so much has happened in the last few months. Now that you say it, yes, these were the times where people could gather in a room and listen to speeches and eat around the table without constraints. The easier days. Remember, it
Yeah.
feels forever. It feels it's
Um,
only been a year, but it feels
I'm
forever.
really optimistic that the time will come back, because this situation is not something that will be withstanding the next several years. It cannot. Human interactions and direct needs to be still something that's happening.
I hope so too. I do hope though that we learn a few things on the way. Um, Sometimes I wonder why. And if we're going to be able to actually extract some learnings from this, the fact that we've all kind of come closer together through ironically through social distancing, and understood how important it is to have that human interaction on the one side, and and on the other side, how it is possible to value things like spending time with your family and loved ones when you're working from home. And also we've come to get to know the homes of so many people, because now currently I'm sitting in the office and you're in a booth, but you see the books that people are reading. You see, oh yeah, I didn't know you play guitar. I remember that the other day. It's like somebody had a guitar in the background. It's like, I didn't know you play guitar. Obviously you never get to see that side of people when you are just gathering in an office. So I hope we get some learnings out of this whole catastrophe that has hit humanity. Yeah.
One thing you mentioned, and I think that's wrongdoing in society, is calling it social distancing, because it isn't and shouldn't be. It's called physical. It should be physical distancing, as it is, because on the contrary, I think what you just mentioned, that socially a lot of things have been bettered and more open and more connections, but it shouldn't be the social distancing itself, but
Yeah.
what happened.
True.
Right. So coming to first question, I think a lot of people want to know is, so you are describing yourself as a pioneer, pioneer in digital media, in social media, in blockchain, just a few areas to name. And you also have been experiencing on firsthand the .com bubble. So why, just in a few words or sentences, why are you actually a pioneer, and what happened in 2000?
Yeah. Well, first of all, that the reason that was possible is because I'm just very old. I guess that's what explains it. I I got, as I mentioned when I introduced myself, I'm a very, very curious person. In the mid of the 90s, when I was starting my career in the field of branding and marketing, I discovered the internet for my, well, I didn't discover it, of course. I discovered it for myself, and it was very early. There were very, very few internet connections. We had the 56K modem and so on and so forth. And I started chatting with my best friend who was living in the US at that time through a monochrome screen chat connection that was extremely slow, cumbersome, and complicated. But to me, it was fascinating because for the first time ever, you could interact with someone that was sitting on the other side of the globe, based purely on technology at zero cost. And that was, and people were asking me what I was doing. All this is times where you didn't have a computer at home. I didn't own a computer. Because computers were expensive. I was just coming off university, and basically people were asking me what I was doing in the computer room, and I used to explain them that I had discovered a technology that allowed to fold geography. That all of a sudden it doesn't matter where you are because technology can bring you immediately closer, and that you could find all sorts of information in there. And then Netscape was created. All of a sudden, you could actually navigate the way, and I was just fascinated. So I thought, well, this thing called the internet, this is going to change the world, and I was completely convinced about it. And since I am a person that is very curious but also very action oriented, I immediately started trying to find ways to do something about it. So I created the first e-commerce project, to my knowledge, of a Fortune 500 company worldwide. I was working at a large cosmetics company, one of the global leaders in cosmetics at that time. So I invented the first shampoo in the world that could only be purchased online, which was absolutely something nobody needed. But and the whole operations behind was totally cumbersome and weird, and it was. But that's, I just wanted to find out what the technology was capable of doing. So yeah, pretty much the same year Amazon went live. I was trying to sell shampoos on the internet and to learn more than anything else.
Look where you have come to. Hmm?
Well, I don't know. Here we are, right? So, and then basically, ever since I've been always exploring the next wave, and I wanted to go further in. So I joined. I was employee number 2 in a full e-commerce startup back in the day, and actually managed to build its brand to become the second best known e-commerce brand in Germany back in the day. I was living in Germany then, and this was in the year 99, and I was granted, and I'm actually one of the things I'm proud of, I was granted the first Effie Award, which is a marketing award that rewards efficiency in communications. The first, which is the only thing I care about, to be honest, the first Effie Award ever in the first year where the category Internet and New Media was launched, which was the year 2000. So yeah. Well, then basically the bubble burst. We all went bankrupt, and you know, we went out with significantly less money than we had hoped eventually, but probably more learnings. So I saw the company growing from employee number 2 to 450 in 10 months. So we were hiring at a rate that was stupid. And then we also had to fire 250 people within 24 hours. So yeah, a lot of learnings from back then, and yeah, that's what happened in the year 2000.
Really interesting, amazingly. I like this story. Hearing it always.
But I mean, and the industry has gone a very, very long way, right? And a lot has happened ever since. But you, Sacha, you set yourself to actually change the IT industry. You know, I remember, you know, computers have been getting smaller and smaller, but you have a focus on sustainability and resources, which is something that isn't a typical thought around computers. So, you know, why is it like that? You want to save the planet single-handedly? How are you doing it? By the way, I'm a huge fan of the fact that you do, because it's not a typical thought, but of an IT company to try and contribute to the. But what's driving that? Why do you want to do that? How are you doing it?
Yes. Thank you. Amazing question for preparing that. Yes, and why want to do it? So, as we know, the world is in and we're not talking about a health situation, but the world itself is in a terrible place, and we see that since a lot of years. But every year, currently, the weather and the temperature gets hotter and hotter, and it's all gonna. In nature, you see that it has huge complications for humanity, for biodiversity, for all of us. And I have a daughter, and I think of what am I on now? What can I do that she has a life worth living for? And we all know that if we don't have changements in industry, in behavioral, but also in how to interact with humans, right? And be less egoistic, that we can do things to be better, but also to be better to the world, so in a more sustainable way. And I think that everything is going to be connected rather sooner than later. By 25, we have more than 30 billion IT devices connected, IoT devices, or everything has a sensor. And this year, I mean, was the biggest advantage this year is digitization, right? So what we did this year would have normally took 3 to 4 years, how intensively this worked. And I think that the IT industry is something that could help so many diverse industries in reaching or diminishing actually the CO2 emissions by making it smarter, by using blockchain, by making it automatic. And with everything, you would need some sort of hardware as well. So why not creating something that uses less energy, that we don't throw away after 2, 3 years, that has on a long-term vision, a circular economy, so that we can reuse it, recycle it, and don't just throw away our resources. And that's where we come in. So I think that IT hardware should be used and produced in a sustainable way as more as we can. And you will see that we see it already by huge capital companies that say, like a BlackRock, that we need to make decision making towards sustainability all over the supply chain, and this will going on and on in future years and months. So this is my actual vision and drive behind that. Yes. But looking on the fact technology, as you mentioned it, so you share and have the love for technology, and you say love between technology and human is special. So why is it special for you?
Yeah, uh, it's uh, it's one of the, well, actually, if I think back at the story of my life and my career, I came up with that a while ago, and I started referring to it as trying to understand and tell others the love story between technology and humanity. And I and basically it's first of all, I think that technology has become an integral part of our lives, and I see that a lot of people still fear it. Especially, I mean, at the beginning, we had fears of disconnecting from one another. People were saying, if you use social channels and whatever, you're no longer interacting with people. And I do not think that is the case. You can have very meaningful connections with people through digital channels. Exactly, like the one, yeah, like the one we are experiencing. Um, Also, then we had all sorts of fears around privacy and intrusion, and that is something that I understand and embrace. But there are ways and technologies, like for example blockchain, that can help solve that. Now, one of the biggest discussions that is going on is the fear of robots taking our jobs. That's a typical, doom scenario around artificial intelligence, and you see that technology, a lot of, well, basically for new technological advances to get mass adoption, it takes a very long time, and there are still a lot of fears, a lot of misconceptions, and so on and so forth. So, I try to see it from the positive side. I try to explain the story between the technology and humanity and the challenge as a love story. And in a love story, you sometimes have frictions, you have challenges, you need to work together, and you need to find ways to harmonize, because and this is my ultimate vision, especially for example when you refer to AI or robots or whatever. I do not think there is going to be a scenario in which we compete against machines. What I rather see is a scenario in which we kind of get, and that's the love story, then the ultimate consummation of that love story is when we end up embracing machines eventually even as part of us. So actually in one of my tattoos, happy to share that. There you go. I don't know if you can see it. It's a Schaltkreis. It's a there you go. So I was trying to reflect how we can merge with technology in a way that makes us, a better version of ourselves. To what you said earlier, which is something that I agree and I embrace too, and that we shouldn't be afraid of it. We should be embracing it. We should be, letting it into our lives, learning about it, and embracing it. And yeah, that's the love story.
Sorry.
No worries. The love story between technology and humanity. A lot of misconceptions that I try to help people understand better.
No, you're totally right. I really like that, especially the idea of this combination. And I heard we mentioned that early on in the beginning. We have a mutual friend, Pascal Kaufmann, and I heard 2 weeks ago a presentation of him where he's speaking about artificial intelligence, what actually is not more rather machine learning, and getting and helping actually the robots or the technology behind that, helping us making decisions, but not taking away actually what we can do, but adjusting it and giving more boost. And we should focus on what on the intelligence and emotional part in our lives in the future, and what we can do better instead of machines that learn and interact. And we should give away that.
Absolutely. I've always actually one of the things that I think we should fix right away um, is is very closely connected to our education with our kids. I mean, you have kids yourself, and they go to school and they learn things that might be relevant for them. The brain is a muscle; it needs to be trained. I think it's good that they learn all sorts of things. But there are two things that oftentimes receive significantly less relevance or less airtime, if you want, when it comes to education. Um, and actually, sometimes they are even not forbidden, but kind of, pushed back, which are creativity and empathy. Creativity and empathy, in my personal view, are the two last standing things that will make us or will basically in which machines or artificial intelligence will take longest to eventually be able to conquer or be able to deploy. So if anything, we should be, actually empathy is something that is being turned down. People are so focused on business and results and da, da, da. Empathy is oftentimes considered a weakness, but it is what makes us humans. And creativity is considered something for artists or this and that. And creativity can be applied to everything, every day, everywhere. Um, it's not about painting or creating advertising or whatever. Creativity is can be problem solving. A code from a programmer can be super creative. So creativity and empathy are two things we should be fostering much more, and we should value much more than we actually do today in the context of our harmonious eventual future together with technology and humanity.
You're right. I really love that what you're saying, and I further think that communication is actually a big part of us as well, and this is also key to creating successful business, as you know, because you're specialized in that as well. So, how do you actually use this skill in your daily life?
Well, communication is, as you said, communication is my business. What I am, what I mostly, the way I mostly try to use it is through the art of storytelling, which is and right now it's quite interesting because you see a lot of storytelling popping up right and left. I've always been fascinated by storytelling, and it starts with, to be honest, this is due to my father. We had no TV when I grew up. It's just, it's just an anecdote, but we used to sit down after lunch and tell each other stories, and my father would tell us stories, and we would make them up and whatever. So I've grew up basically with storytelling and as a storyteller. The beautiful thing about stories is that they are much easier to relate to. They can explain a complex situation very easily, and people remember them, and they can travel. So in my, I even have it written in my business card. It says strategist, creator, and storyteller, because that's pretty much what I think is the basis of good communication for a business. But you can also think about it for yourself as a person. You have to have a strategy of what it is you're trying to communicate. What is the goal? What is the target group? What is the channel? How do you define your communication strategy? Then you need to be creative around finding interesting and different ways of reaching your goals and transforming that strategy into action. And then the best way to deliver that is through stories. And that's pretty much what I try to. It's not a methodology. It's just probably just a question of a mindset. And that's how I try to do it all the time.
You're right. You're absolutely right. And this always when I have a conversation with you, I feel that, and that's one of your strong points. I absolutely love that. But when you're not working, or talking to friends, you spend time playing music in a band. Is music? Yeah, you do, and I really like that fact. So music a balance for you?
Yes, it is. Music, for me personally, music is a gift. Music is probably the universal language uh, for the world. You might not understand the lyrics of a song if it's in a language that you don't speak, but the energy and the spirit and the emotions that song will convey can get you going. And yeah, music to me is at least in my life is an incredible strong way of expressing feelings. And yes, I it's a hobby, of course. We play in a band. We get into a bunker, which in Switzerland you have a lot of bunkers everywhere. So we go down into a bunker and can be very, very, very loud. And it's a great way to let go of everything, to be creative, to be loud, to be wild, to be empathetic also, because it's not only about being loud. Sometimes it's very, very emotional, and very deep, and it's an incredibly, to me, it's an incredible gift, that allows you to experience all sorts of things, thanks to a universal language, the actually ultimate universal language, probably. Yeah.
Yes. I have a saying that everything is better with music, and I really mean that. So I'm someone who's really anxious, not anxious, but I don't like driving without having music on
Yeah.
it. I'm not making radio, my music, or I always try to put music on when I do something, and it means when you're sad, when you're good, but you always then when you think back. You often have, when you think about memories, you sometimes think about a melody or a song or something, or when you hear the song you think about that situation, and this is something that's in my mind, just mind blowing, and I really like that, and it helps me go through stuff.
Yeah, yeah. You're. I know you as a person that is very is very deep. You're a professional, and you're a business driver and entrepreneur, and you're building a very big serious company. But you do that, as we saw earlier, with some with sustainability and some you always try to infuse meaning in things and to develop. I remember when one of the first conversations we had, where you were mentioning that you always try to grow and develop and learn, and that seems to be something that drives you. What is the specific driver, or the reason for that drive in you, and how do you fulfill that, especially knowing that, you're running a big business, right? Wouldn't it be much easier just to focus on profits and just get everybody doing whatever it is that you want? And you have a very kind of meaningful style also about yourself as a person. So what's how do you balance that? How do you bring that to life? What is the key behind that?
Thank you so much. Yes, I think so my personal thing, what I had over the past years, that I try to be as positive as I can, even though I have that in bad situations. You should always accept it, react in that way, that okay, it made you sad, even though, for instance, in current times when you lose someone, etc. But if you keep on the okay, everything had the meaning. I mean, we are not the ones that can, a lot of things happen to us from the outside which we cannot control, and if you think positive on aspects about that, it's like okay, sometimes things have a meaning, and therefore we go for the next step, because the earth keeps on turning, and we are on that, either we want or not, and we need to be positive about that. So I try to reflect on things, I try to keep on, even though that a few things might be difficult. And what I say always is, every day, if you today is a good day, And if you, it is because you have so much opportunity to learn. And if you're open to that, it doesn't matter if you're 80 or 12 or in between. Every conversation, even though what we have currently, this is an amazing learning factor. And not just the, I'm not talking about the information we transmit, I'm not talking about how we transmit it, how we each other, how we know and learn things about the other person, or in general what we do, and being open about stuff. I also have a thing saying, find something that you love, do that every day for the rest of your life. And that's something I really like and spiritual about that, because you can, the biggest hinder or the biggest problem humans have is our own mind.
Mm.
And we know that, so we set ourselves negativity, stepstones, things. I mean, how the biggest sportsman, woman in the world can endure like crazy Iron Man things. It is because they're up here in their mind, right? If you say, oh, I cannot anymore, your body will always continue because you have a strong mindset. And this is a never give up, be positive and move forward. This is something I think I do well, and I like to give away around me in order to help the surrounding to be the best version of themselves.
Cool.
Exactly. Thanks. So by finishing it, I hope you enjoyed it. We always finish with a little either or questions. So I give you a question. You can say whatever you prefer, or like, or what's more we sending to you. Is that okay?
Okay. Go
Cool.
ahead.
So let's start. Football or Formula One?
None. If I had to pick, it'll be football, but only if I had to pick. I
Okay.
would. Otherwise, I would go with sailing, kite surfing, or music, or anything else. Probably
Then let's go on. It's either or nothing, right? Car or bike?
car.
Book or podcast?
Oh, podcast.
Okay. A tent or a hotel?
Hotel.
hmm The stairs or the elevator?
Uh, the stairs, unless I'm destroyed.
Cash or credit card?
Huh. Cash.
Are you a gut person or a head person?
I am a gut person. I am a gut person that thinks a lot.
Are you a dreamer or a realist?
Uh, I am. I am someone who tries to make dreams real.
Good answer. Fruit or vegetable?
Vegetables.
iOS or Android?
iOS. Sorry. Forever and a day.
Tablet or personal computer?
Personal computer.
Right or left-handed?
Right-handed, but sometimes having two left hands.
So now I know the answer of the next question, but hip hop or rock music?
Uh, Hip hop is awesome. Hip hop is awesome, but definitely and absolutely rock music.
I knew that. So thank you so much for answering that. I really, really enjoyed that, and I hope to see you soon, my friend.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sasha. Thank you for having me. And stay healthy and positive. I know you will.
Thanks. Bye bye.
Bye bye.